It's December 7th, 2022. We're in Seattle, Washington, and I'm Judith Y., the Archives Chair for District 40. I'm here today with Polly. So, Polly, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Polly P. My sobriety date is March 14th, 1980, and my home group is Practice These Principles in Seattle.
So, Polly, how about sharing with us a little bit about how what it was like and how you ended up coming to AA?
Okay, sure. Yeah, I grew up in New York, in Brooklyn, and grew up in a family that had a lot of drinking going on, and I just fit right in that mold. And what part I didn't fit in was most people in my family managed to drink the way they wanted to and keep things reasonably together. And I drank the way I wanted to, and I totally screwed up. And I just, from the age of so I had my first drink when I was about 11. I was stealing beers at can from my father and planting them till I had a bunch of them, and then I would drink them all at once and get really blasted. By the time I was 15, I started having blackouts. But at that age, too, it was hard for me to get as much booze as I wanted. And so that was the constraint that I had on my drinking and drug-taking behavior. And I also grew up in Brooklyn in the 1970s, and drugs were widely available, too. So I did those, too. And again, I was constrained about how much I could take. But when I did get my hands on booze or drugs, I drank to excess. And as I said, when I was about 15 or 16, I started having blackouts. And at first they were like, I couldn't remember how I got home. And, just an hour or two was missing. But then as time went on, they became more and more severe. And also I was just totally screwing up. In my family, like school is very important. I had done very well in school up until then. And I started just screwing up and not being able to go to school, to perform well, to do my homework, to do any of that kind of basic functioning stuff. I just stopped doing that kind. And in fact, I had left high school early to go to college when I was 16, and a year later had the quote honor of being both a high school and college dropout at the same time, because I just could not complete anything. And my blackouts got more severe, and my parents got more and more mad at me. I'm the only kid, so they had lots of time to focus on me and my misbehavior, and so it was a real problem. And also about when I was 16, I came out, and my parents were really not happy about that at all. And I found my way to a gay youth group that was forming in New York then. And it was just kids. And I had a blast hanging out with them because, we just ran up and down the streets of the West Village at 3:00 in the morning, and we snuck into bars, even though we were way underage, and we went and had, many escapades and fun. I remember once I went on a camping trip with them. We went to camp in upstate New York in the Catskills, and we were driving down the road. One of us could drive, and we drove past a bar called The Stallion. And my car mates were like, no straight people call their bar The Stallion. Only gay people call their bars The Stallion. We have to go there immediately. And so, we all just got blasted up there too. When I was 17, maybe it was a little bit later, I had 2 cases of walking pneumonia, and, one after another. And my doctor said to me, when I was in her office, I kind of had the shakes. She said to me, young lady, just how much do you drink? And I said, well, I have a can of beer every now and then. And the weird thing about that was that as I said that, I was not conscious of lying at all. I thought I was telling the truth, which was, to me, a really scary aspect of alcoholism, is that you think you're actually telling the truth and you're just being completely delusional. And I was being delusional. And I had, intended to not drink the night before I went to this doctor's appointment, but then I got hammered. And, I woke up that morning on my parents' kitchen floor again, and, ran off to the doctor's office and presented myself as this complete mess. And this doctor is like asking after me. And here it is that I, completely lied about that. Anyway, my behavior was so problematic. My parents insisted that I go to therapy. And I was kind of slowly working things through with a therapist. She was actually quite helpful in many ways. And sometimes she would ask me about my drinking, my drug taking. And let's see, what was the sequence of events? She went away on vacation. And while she was away on vacation, one day I was walking into like a diner, like an old New York 70s Greek diner, with like "Our pleasure to serve you" kind of printed on the coffee cups and, all that kind of stuff. And so I was in there to get a container of coffee to take with me to someplace. And in the back room, I saw a group of women. They were all lesbians, and I recognized one of them. So I went back to go back and say hi, and I was chatting with her, and I said, "Oh, so what's this group?" And she smiled really broadly at me, and she said, "This is my AA group," and I'm like, like. So my vision of AA at that point was, I thought, like, I could imagine what in my mind, somebody who was terribly elderly, like a 40-year-old, who had some sort of corporate job, and then having to go to AA. That was like my vision of AA. It wasn't like I guess the first iteration of AA vision was like, oh, it's all full of falling down drunks. But then they had like this PR blitz, and then they were like, no, you can be respectable and have a drinking problem and go to AA. So I thought you had to be respectable to go to AA. And I just did not feel like I fit into that group at all. I was a kid, and I was gay, and, and I just didn't feel like that. And so she shattered, by introducing me to that table of people, she totally shattered my vision about what it meant to be in AA. So about a week later, I had a terrible blackout. Like I had a job, and I was working as a proofreader at some law firm, and they were having a goodbye party for somebody leaving, and they had little Dixie cups with like a half an inch of wine in them or something that they were passing around, and I had one, and then I went into a blackout, and I lost, I guess, the last maybe more than 8 hours, 7 hours of what happened next. Like I came out of my blackout at various times. I remember I came out of the blackout. I had this strong sensation of the floor in this bar coming up to meet my nose. It was, of course, me falling off a bar stool, but I, just didn't experience it that way at all. And then I would go back into the blackout. When I came out of the blackout for the last time there, I was in this completely empty subway car, and I was somewhere in New York, but I didn't know where. I didn't know this neighborhood. It was 2:00 in the morning. I had no idea what I'd been doing. It just sort of all of a sudden came to me that I was dying, and it was really booze that was doing it to me. And I felt really despairing. But I just had that insight that I hadn't had before, because, always, the reasons for my problems were my parents or smoking. I quit smoking just before this, which I'm really glad I did, but it didn't cure my alcoholism. And like, that was the time that I had some clarity that it was actually booze was my problem. And so I called AA, and they gave me the information to that meeting that my friend went to. And I went to that meeting, and that was my first meeting. And I heard this woman named Jean S. speak, and she was amazing. I mean, there were parts of her story that were not my story, but so much of what she said was. And I remember that sense of really identifying with somebody for the first time, I think, in my life. And she was just, I can't tell you how shocking it was for me, because like in the sort of the environment I grew up in, like you didn't like go spill your guts to anybody. Like to me, like going to therapy, all that stuff was just such a foreign concept to me. And to be in this room full of people who spoke honestly about where they were at, that was just shocking to me. really hadn't really imagined that world. So I started going to other meetings. This was all in New York, of course. I started that first meeting at the old LFL on West 20th Street. And I started going to other meetings down in the Village. Where I wound up landing really was the Greenwich Village group, which is not an explicitly gay group. It's everybody in the world group. And that's where I ended up feeling most comfortable. It was just a great group. And one thing I didn't understand is that there was like incredible history to that place. And for example, a member of the group was this guy, Barry L. And I knew this guy, Barry L, was sober a long time. I didn't know that he wrote Living Sober. He was a good friend of Lois's. And there were other members of the GSO who were members of that group, like Helen T. A guy whose story is in the 4th edition of the big book, Phil P., was on the beginners panel when I started going to that meeting. And, I just remember him so clearly. And he has really a very inspirational story in the big book. And just lots of people like that. And after I was going to meetings for a couple of months, somebody said to me, oh, Marty M's funeral is today. We're all going to go out to Marty M's funeral. And I'm like, well, who the hell's Marty? I'm like, I had no idea. And so I just blew it off. And I'm so sorry that I missed that. That was, apparently just one of the really important events of New York AA history. And she was, of course, the first woman to get sober and stay sober in AA. And I went to some other groups too, like some more commuter groups like Renaissance or Mustard Seed when my job moved around. But St. Luke's, what's formerly called the Greenwich Village group, but everybody called it St. Luke's, was really my home group and was for a long time. I got my first sponsor there. I, of course, did not want to get a sponsor, because to me, I just figured I would just study really hard and ace the AA exam. I didn't need to do the sponsor, the steps crap or whatever. The God stuff weirded me out and, all that kind of stuff. But finally, well, I think what happened for me is I was continuing to smoke pot, I guess, for the first 3 weeks or so, because I thought my problem was alcohol. And I remember thinking explicitly, this is a real thought I had, that I should probably not take acid more than once a year as a sober person. More than that would probably be too much. So anyway, I heard enough stories about people going out and starting with, smoking pot and then eventually picking up a drink. And I was really super scared of picking up a drink that I decided to try to not do it with drugs. And then I got a sponsor and I was too scared, of course, to ask anybody to be my sponsor. I was too afraid of the rejection. So I went to St. Luke's had a temporary sponsor program. And so I just went to the coordinator and asked for a sponsor. And she said, I'm going to be your sponsor. and it's funny, because in classic A form, she was totally unlike me. And, on a superficial level, we were two of the more different people in the world. I mean, we were both young women, but that's it. That's what we had in common. And she helped me so much. I can't tell you how absolutely astonishing that guidance. So here's where we get to one of the differences, I think, between Seattle AA and New York AA, which is there wasn't really an emphasis there about like getting to the steps right away or doing a 4th step right away or, reading the book together. It was not formal like that. Where I got sober, the methodology, such as it was, just involved going out to coffee afterward and just talking and talking and talking and talking. And then eventually your sponsor might say, hey, maybe it's time for you to look at this step or whatever. But it just was not this formalized approach. There was like no homework giving or anything like that. It was spending basically many hours of your life at the Bagel Land on Christopher Street, talking with other people over coffee. So eventually I tried to do the 4th step and my sponsor just said, I just don't think you're ready. And you're just using this, from what you're telling me so far, you're just using this to beat up on yourself. And you really need to take a step back and just go back 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, keep focusing on that. And so when I was about 14 months sober, she actually allowed me to do a fourth step. And I did do it. I had to set a time limit because otherwise I was just going to spend the rest of my life working on this thing. And so I just said, okay, well, whatever I have Saturday at 3:00, that's my fourth step. And if it's not complete and I have to go back and do it again, so be it. I will do it again, but then I'll do it. So I did that. And of course, I didn't want to tell my fourth step or have my fifth step with my sponsor, because that would really, I would feel too exposed for that. So I asked somebody else, Deirdre O, to listen to my fifth step under the theory that we only overlapped one meeting a week. And so if things went really badly, I could just change the meeting and never see her again. And that would be my escape plan. And so the funny thing happened is that I did my fifth step with Deirdre O, and I actually felt closer to her as a result, which was very shocking to me. I mean, I knew that people said that, but I did not think that would apply to me. And so she became my second sponsor for a long time. And she's a longtime sober person now living in Nebraska, last I heard. Her father actually was one of the, Marty O, was one of sort of the part of the very early core group of New York AAs, and who knew Bill. And his sponsor was this wonderful, wonderful man named Jerry B, who also went to St. Luke's, who also knew that whole crowd. I mean, they were all like ancient AA history kind of stuff. That was pretty amazing. So I was going back to school at this point and not screwing it up so badly. So then that put me in better graces with my parents. And to what happened at St. Luke's changed a little bit. So a group started up in the East Village called Living Sober, and many people from the group ended up going from St. Luke's, started going there, and St. Luke's became a much more homogenized group and much wider and much more sort of like middle class or upper middle class. It really kind of changed the flavor of St. Luke's having that happen. And I really miss that. I miss, some of the absolutely wonderful people that I knew who went to Living Sober, like this guy named Toothpick John, and I mean, everybody should have a Toothpick John in their life, as far as I'm concerned. Just I think the thing that amazed me about AA is that I ended up interacting with all sorts of people who were really different from me, and I really saw how the same they were to me. And after feeling so separate from other people, that was just really the lesson of AA for me, and has been. Anyways, to skip ahead way a lot, I came to Seattle in 1996 for a job. And so I was already sober, 16 years. And when I first started having to pick a group to go to in the area, I went to the Monday night Queen Anne gay group, which was mostly a very large group of gay men. I've always felt really super comfortable in meetings with lots of gay men. And so I kind of found a home there, and they made me literature, chair there and so forth. And so that was really nice. I really liked that. I didn't branch out that much from other meetings there. I occasionally went to the Counterbalance. I occasionally went to the Old Timers meeting up at Ballard that happened once a month. I don't know what its status is now, and then when I moved to Mount Baker because I was moving in with my wife-to-be, I started going instead to the Mount Baker group, and it had a couple of groups that met in that same church. And I don't remember the formal title of that, but that was my home group for a while. And then they ran out of steam really about 2001 or so. I know groups go through that thing, and I don't know if they've revived or not. That group was kind of going through a low point. It wasn't a huge group to begin with. And if I remember correctly, one of the group members who I didn't know particularly well committed suicide, and that kind of cast a pall on things. And I remember a contentious business meeting that we had. I had a problem because at the time the Iraq War had just started happening, and many people were sharing a lot about that. And while I had exactly the same opinions as everybody else in that meeting, I just was a little uncomfortable because I felt like it just, if we weren't staying, I didn't want to be like the lefty liberal AA meeting. I just wanted to be in an AA meeting. So I remember a contentious business meeting about that, about people sharing about that stuff. And it's always like, I think a weird dividing line in AA meetings, like on the one hand, if it concerns an alcoholic in their sobriety, they should feel free to share it. On the other hand, I guess I give a lot of slack to somebody who's in their first couple of years in sobriety, but I feel like those of us who are sober longer should figure out how to, I don't know how to put it, should be careful about not creating an atmosphere which excludes other people, I guess is how I would say that. And I was just really concerned about that. Anyway, that group ran out of steam, and I ended up going to Broadway instead, which reminded me of the old St. Luke's meeting that I liked a lot. It's just a real big collection of, all sorts of different kinds of people, lots of young people. I really enjoy getting meetings with lots of young people, and all the energy. There were people with lots of time there. There were a lot of people who are newly sober. It was just a really kind of a fun meeting. And that's the one that I stuck to really till about 2016. And I felt like I was, due to external events, I felt like, going to one meeting a week just was not going to cut it for me, because I felt like we entered kind of a strange new world in 2016. And, I just felt like I need to do more of my program, because I didn't feel like I was in imminent danger of picking up, but I could feel myself slipping away there. And so I went to PTP and asked Jean Z, actually, if she would sponsor me. And she tried to say as nicely as possible, no, I'm really overloaded. It can't possibly work, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, please, I promise I'll never actually call you. So she, gets the occasional phone call, or we have the occasional coffee or whatever. So as much as I can lay claim to having a sponsor now, she's it. She's the person I feel most comfortable, sort of talking to about whatever's going on. So I started going to PTP at least a couple of times a week, and really enjoying that group of people, which is, again, very diverse. I like the old timers. I like the newly sober people. I like the old folks. I like the kids. I like the gay guys. I like everything. So I started going there until the pandemic hit, and I was so sad because I went for, I think, 2 or 3 weeks without going to any meeting at all. I didn't know what was happening because I wasn't that super well plugged into it. So nobody was calling me up and saying, hey, Zoom meetings or anything like that. So I just was like, I wish I had a place to go. I wish I knew what was going on. It was such a weird time. I mean, I knew one of the first people to die of COVID, and I knew it was really serious. But it was very, isolating, and I didn't know how it was going to work. And I called Jean. I did one of those astonishing things where I called Jean, and she told me about the Zoom meetings. And so I was able to get more plugged in to AA, mostly to PTP, a little bit to Broadway, but I haven't done any of the Zoom meetings there in a long time. So I think that's my story. Do you have any follow-up questions?
This has been great. I really like the contrast between New York and Seattle. One of the questions I've had is, did you feel like there has been any issues around being gay and going to meetings? But it sounds like you mostly went to gay meetings, or,
In Seattle or New York, or?
Well, in Seattle, let's say in Seattle, maybe in New York when you first started out.
Not particularly New York, because, I got sober in the West Village. A little bit more after I graduated from college. I actually lived in New Jersey, and then that was more of an issue because there were attempts made at the local service level to delist any gay meetings, and so they were just. And also, I think, attempts to delist women's meetings. So that occasionally happened. So that was a pretty hostile sort of environment. And the theory was, I think, that if you went to a gay meeting in New Jersey, then you were excluding non-gay people, although that was not at all true for my home group in New Jersey, the Princeton gay group. that group was open to absolutely everybody who wandered in through the front door. But that was, a little bit uncomfortable. In Seattle, no, I mean, I went to this, meeting with like 60 gay guys, and I was really happy. That was fine. And I didn't ever feel like it was particularly a big issue in, Mount Baker or Broadway, or there were usually at least a couple of other gay people there. So it just didn't seem like a big deal. I mean, years ago, I went to when I was here for a visit, before I ever moved out here, I went to the Yellow House there, and I knew that group existed, though I didn't go there, once I moved there. But yeah, it just didn't seem like, much of a problem.
So do you have sponsees?
No sponsees, because I feel like by Seattle AA standards, I'm not that plugged in. I sort of didn't do it the way a lot of people here did this, where they read the book with somebody and they went through the steps in this very rigorous way. And, I mean, I did go through 8-step and 9-step amends, and I do try to meditate and I try to do all that stuff, but I don't really feel like I do it quite right for here. And so I don't, at various times I tried to sponsor people, but they were looking for somebody to give sort of more of a, homework style approach. And that's just not how I got sober.
Sometimes I think we all suffer from the feeling that we don't do it right.
I know I didn't invent that feeling.
What about service? Do you have anything to say about service?
I've done things at the local level, like literature chair, which I really liked. Just getting books into the hands of people, to me, the Lord's work. And something that has been really helpful to me since the pandemic has been occasionally doing a Zoom service, like co-hosting meetings, because I felt like that was something that, I could do well and be of service to people who maybe didn't feel that comfortable doing those kinds of roles. And I'm also very happy that I was able to encourage some other people to give co-hosting a try, people who weren't that comfortable doing it. And I'd say, well, why don't you and I just practice a little bit and you can see what it's like. And so I was very happy about that.
I know some people have really complained about the Zoom meetings, and they regret not having in-person meetings. Do you want to say anything more about the effect of Zoom on AA in this age of COVID?
I was already used to the concept because I've spent actually a fair amount of time in various parts of Asia, and I had a job which meant spending a lot of time working in a factory in Guangdong province in mainland China. And so there, almost all the meetings there happened, not necessarily Zoom, but through Skype or, other electronic means. So I was totally used to the concept of that and had done that. I mean, there's only a few major cities in Asia, especially if you only speak English. There are only a few cities which have really large, English speaking communities. They have great communities, like Bangkok has one, Hong Kong. I mean, these are just great cities. But if you live outside those cities, then you have to do it via Zoom or Skype or whatever. And so, I love the convenience of Zoom meetings, and it's been a lifesaver during the pandemic. I'm not a huge sharer in meetings to begin with, and I share even less in Zoom. I do have that sort of intimidation factor with that going on. So there's a little bit of that, but I go to many more meetings than I think I would be going to. If we didn't have a pandemic and that wasn't an issue, and it was just in-person meetings, I'm able to get to so many more, and that's really super enjoyable. I really like these once a month meetings that they do, the Zoomtown meetings, which are basically lesbian supported meetings in San Francisco. You get to hear speakers from Ireland and from South Africa and, just from all over the world. And I really enjoy that too. That opened up a whole new world for me, but I just have to deal with the shyness factor.
So what were they called again? Zoomtown meetings?
Yeah, Zoomtown. They happen once a month. They have you ever watched any of the presentation about Marty Mann?
No, I haven't, unfortunately.
Okay. They kind of spun out of that. And then there's a similar sort of presentation going on now about Barry Leach. the Bariel I spoke to from
Mhm.
Living Sober too. And then these just speaker meetings kind of evolved out of that. And they happen once a month.
Do you go to meetings around the world then?
Only in that context. I mean, I really enjoy it, but I haven't like joined for a while there. We just had this wonderful cross-pollination of like, there was this, I remember somebody with a wonderful English accent. This guy used to come into PTP, from London. I just completely enjoyed listening to this guy. And then I thought I should do that. I should go to some meetings in London. And then I didn't. So I didn't entertain them all with my American accent.
Do you have any like favorite literature or phrases or passages in any of the literature that you especially look to and you or appreciate?
So this is a paraphrase, and so I'm probably gonna butcher it. But the one I really like best, I think it comes out of the 12 and 12, is the one about how the things that we are most ashamed of will become our sources of most strength because we can share it with other people. Again, I totally screwed up the paraphrase, but I really like that. I think that is just an absolutely awesome insight. And that's one of the things in the 12 and 12 that I read about a billion times and I passed over it a billion times and it never sunk in. And then I went to the Mount Baker meeting, in fact, and the speaker that night mentioned that passage. And I'm like, who snuck in and stuck that in the book? I never heard that before. And I was like sober like 22 years or something like that. But I swear to God, I'd never heard that before. And it's great. It's awesome.
So it strikes me that, I didn't get sober until I was 68. So hearing people talk about getting sober when they were really young sometimes makes me feel very envious because you've had such a long time to have a sober life. But then I think, well, the sooner you start, the longer you got. So at least I started at 68.
There are people who never get it at all. I mean, I feel incredibly lucky. I mean, to get sober as a kid and to have that incredible wild energy, and going to, we did all these crazy things like go to the midnight meeting in Manhattan, which at the time was so crazy. They used to issue baseball bats to the chair. I mean, that is really crazy. And then, I went there a lot with my friend Gil, who I guess I didn't mention at all, but he got sober about a year after me. We were friends since we were kids. And, he drank the way I did. And my sponsor told me to stay away from him because he was going to get me drunk. And then I didn't. And then he got sober, like I said, about a year after me. So we went to meetings and hung out an awful lot. And he's just an incredible part of my sobriety until he died in the AIDS epidemic, and just a few months before the cocktail drugs came out. Like then all of a sudden people started living, but he died just a couple of months before that. I miss him just so much. Anyway, he and I had the best time careening around Manhattan, going to the midnight meeting. It was just this crazy time, and we just would hang out some coffee shops, until 3:00 in the morning, just talking about this, that, and the other thing, and going to roundups and to young people's conferences. We went to Icky-Pal. It's just incredible energy, and I feel so lucky to have had that history. But like the way you get sober as a kid is by being a massive fuck up early and often, and that's what I was. That's how I got sober.
It strikes me that you were in AA during the 80s, so that was at the height of the AIDS epidemic, the sadness of seeing people not make it through those years.
Yeah, I was still going to meetings in the West Village, and it was of course the epicenter of a lot of the HIV epidemic, and it killed some of the heroes, and it was just very hard to watch. I remember too, just the fear level was incredible. I used to go to this meeting in New York called High Noon, and we had a speaker over from Perry Street, which is, High Noon was a mostly gay meeting. Perry Street was like a I mean, to the extent any meeting in the West Village is, a mostly straight meeting, it's certainly a more of a mixed meeting. And we had a speaker there, and she came there. It was a really hot, horrible, humid day in Manhattan. And the speaker came and told her story, but she was, the entire time she was speaking, she was wearing rubber gloves in this impossibly hot day. And like everybody was like, well, I'm not going to ask her what the gloves are about. I'm not, we all just kind of pretended like this was perfectly normal. And she didn't mention this at all. But I think for most people, certainly this was my feeling, it was because she was just afraid of being around us, physically afraid of us. And so that kind of stuff had happened, and it was really depressing. And, when I got that job and went to work out in the suburbs, in a way, it was nice just to feel like I was on vacation from AIDS, just being 75 miles away, just put me in a world where it didn't feel like every day you were learning who was in the hospital and, people disappearing. That happened a lot in West Village. People just disappeared.
Would you have any particular words of wisdom for people, young people right now trying to get sober? Thinking about possibly, maybe sometime getting sober.
I always want to say, oh, it's one of the best things I've done in my life. But like the best things I did in my life are pretty key, like coming out or, I mean, it's in that category of things that were just incredibly vital for me to do and for me to have a decent life. And I just, I came to AA because booze just did not work for me anymore. It just wasn't a viable plan. Okay, I guess I'm not saying that those are words of wisdom, but that's the best I can do. I mean, I didn't feel like I had a choice, and I did it that way, but also I feel like insanely lucky to have had all these experiences of the last 40 odd years as a sober person. I just was able to go do all sorts of things that I could not imagine doing as a drinking alcoholic. It just was not an option for me.
Just so happy that you're willing to spend some time with me today and share your thoughts and memories about all of this.
Well, thank you.